I think the permanent piece, it's just so cool to see it penetrating the depths of institutions and cities and states even now.
Hello, and welcome to Shared Space, a podcast about the power of architecture and design to make us healthier, happier, and more connected. I'm your host, Erin Peavy, and I'm so glad that you're here with us. Today, I'm speaking with award-winning transportation and placemaking expert, Andrew Howard. Andrew is a speaker, changemaker, and co-founder and principal of Team Better Block. Team Better Block was founded with Jason Roberts in 2010 and has focused around transportation and placemaking for public outreach. And what that's meant is that they go into communities where there's oftentimes a sort of car-centric, blighted, or underused urban area. Think of a lot of the streets throughout our nations. And what they do is they temporarily re-engineer these spaces and help the communities to reimagine them. Alongside his neighbors, he built the first two Better Blocks in Dallas, Texas, where I'm living currently. And he's really pioneered the idea of using pop-up demonstrations as an urban planning method. Now, this method has been used over 200 communities, from Sydney, Australia to Bethel, Vermont. Better Block is seen as an alternative to typical design. And they have an amazing open source resources on their website, so make sure to check them out at teambetterblock.com. Andrew, I'm so happy to have you. Welcome to Shared Space.
Thank you for having me, Erin.
So I wanted to start off with one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is social connection and also loneliness. And I was wondering if you had an early memory of a space that you feel embodied community and connection for you growing up.
Yeah, it actually came from maybe a pretty unique place. I remember at a young age, my grandmother would just show up at my house sometimes and be like, get in the car. We're going on a road trip. You're going to see some history, you know. And we went to the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas once. Mm-hmm. And it had closed in the 70s. So this was probably early 80s, you know, So it was just getting into its decline. Mm-hmm. And she was all of like 92 pounds, probably, my grandma, Masita. Mm-hmm. I remember walking up to it and I was like, Grandma, this is closed. Masita, this is closed. And she just kind of like nudged the door open and we went into this grand palace of a hotel out in Mineral Wells. I thought she was the coolest thing before.
Oh my God, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, she just busted into this, old hotel. And we're walking around these grand ballrooms and she's telling me stories about, how, during the 20s they would go there and 30s and it was, this bustling place and just the stories of like how people came to that little town and had such a great experience. Mm-hmm. And as much as the hotel hit me, what hit me more was when I walked out on their main street in Mineral Wells and it was just completely dead.
Yeah.
I didn't know for years later, but my mom was, getting cleaning out the closets, at the house. Yeah. She says, oh, you're going to want this. And she gave me a letter that she had photocopied that I wrote to President Reagan. And said, we need to fix this place.
Oh my God, I love it. Oh my God.
So that was in my subconscious for many years until I figured out where my place was in loving cities.
Oh my God, that is the sweetest, most awesome childhood story. So, Okay, so that's a great transition. Tell me about what's been your path getting to this.
Yeah.
Clearly it started young.
It's been a bumpy one. I mean, I've always been kind of a rabble rouser. So the end of the story is that when I got to the Loeb Fellowship at Harvard, the director of the Loeb Fellowship gave me a poster, which I'm looking at right now, an old photograph of the Baker Hotel. And it's it'd come full circle, and I went from this kid learning about it to at Harvard. And in between there, worked in many different fields at city and government levels, worked in a big consulting firm, started Team Better Block really with neighbors and, painting our own bike lanes, and kind of thinking I might lose my certification. I might get jailed, at some point, I mean, we're breaking the law.
Worth it.
Yeah. And then to end up at Harvard and have this, director give me this mineral, thing from Baker Hotel, I was just like, well, it's come full circle. So it's definitely been a wild ride. And it's just now I think we're reaching maturity with the project. We've merged with WGI, which is a national practice in environmental and engineering. Mm-hmm. And so, people are always like, well, what are y'all doing with that? And I said, it's really, Better Block has become part of the suite of planning tools that we're using across this country now. And so it feels good. I feel in a good place right now. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about Better Block's process. So traditional Better Blocks, as I understand it, are somewhere between 90 and 120-day community engagement projects. But I know that you guys can be as short as a single day. So tell us about that sort of temporary nature and why you decided to go in that direction and what you think those sort of lasting impacts of that are.
Well, I'm imagining a bunch of the listeners today and followers of your podcast are professionals like us in the design field. And really this came from me hanging out with just some normal folks,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and them asking, why can't we have this? Why can't we have complete streets? Why don't we have placemaking? Why don't we have cool places? And in our own neighborhood, they would ask me what's going on. And I'm like, oh, it just takes time. You got to do zoning. You got to do this. And when I met up with Jason Roberts, he was like from IT, and he's like, well, no, if you got a problem, you just go fix it, And so he just didn't know any better. And I was, I knew enough to get myself in trouble. And that's where the first couple of Better Blocks were very organic, I would say.
Yeah.
It was pure. I mean, we just wanted to make a better place.
Yeah.
And we painted our own bike lane. We did pop-up shops based upon what some of our friends had always wanted to try. They always wanted to try a coffee shop. They always wanted a flower shop. They wanted a kids' art studio. We just found a loophole in how to get that done quickly, and that was the special event permit.
Oh,
so
nice.
Jason and other, we'd already done parties. We were doing Mardi Gras, and we did Bike Friendly Oak Cliff, where we would do these bike rides, and we would pull special events. And I saw that and I was like, this is like our loophole in the system here. You can get anything done with a special event permit. For anybody out there that's ever done, a building permit that's listening to this podcast, the headaches you can get. Mm-hmm. And that red pen is out. When a special event permit comes across, like checking boxes. I mean, and it's really cool because it's part of our American democracy that we're able to assemble. And so I've yet to find a place that wouldn't give us a permit for an assembly of a Better Block. And so that's kind of the basis of it, Aaron, that gave us that framework. And then we wanted to work quick because it's a lot of volunteers. And so we didn't want to wear people out. So we said, if we do it quick, we won't talk ourselves out of it. Cool. And we didn't give ourselves enough time to come up with the worst case scenarios that could happen.
So like one of the things I'd love to hear some of the examples, I just saw an example the other day of a project that you guys had done, I think in Richardson, Texas, where you had kind of pop-up type thing. And then it was probably a year and a half later, and they transformed that into a built bike lane. And so I was wondering if you could sort of share with us a few stories around what this can look like, not only, yes, definitely on the short term, but also on the long term.
Great question. It's been, 10 years of maturity of the program. And I don't think that Better Block was anywhere the first people to do pop-up of any sort, like this was already kind of brewing in the internationally. Folks were getting fed up with the bureaucracy of moving cities forward. And so, there's hundreds of organizations out that are doing great work. And And what set us apart is we gave it a name. Myself as a planner, I created a process that went planning process.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave it a methodology that other
Yeah.
people could recreate and that fit into the existing planning process that was out there of
Yeah.
cities. So that was kind of the first maturity of it, was to formalize it and give it a name, give it
Yeah.
a way of replicating itself, and
Yeah.
make it of something that can be taught. And that's what we've seen. It's now in school. They're teaching the Better Block method, which is awesome.
I think that's such good advice for like anyone trying to have impact built environment or not. Don't wait around, and give it a name and give it a process. Think about like, what would it be if you were going to teach it? I love that.
Set a date. That was our biggest one.
That's a
like,
good one.
Okay, it's December, like in March, we're doing this. And that deadline, forces you to, not planning deadlines, like we move those all the time, but special event, you can't cancel a special event because people are showing up, like they're going to be there. You're throwing a party. You have to perform. I think the permanent piece, it's just so cool to see it penetrating the depths of institutions and cities and states even now.
Mm-hmm.
So, we see this now in RFPs, we see it in policy.
Can you like paint a picture, like give us a specific example that kind of embodies some of that?
Right. Most recently, so the state of California saw what was going on out there with pop-up urbanism, tactical urbanism, Better Block, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they're going to call it quick build out there.
Mm.
And they saw some communities doing it, and they put $2.5 million toward $4.4 million statewide together for it.
Wow.
Those are state funds that would have been building highways. And now they're going to be building quick build projects for people. And
that's
so
cool.
That maturity of it is basically saying that we don't have to wait as long anymore. And I think it's what we're seeing is, the Better Block, not every location do we have to go through the full Better Block process of doing the pop-up. More and more people are saying, just give it to us. Like, we're ready. Build the bike lane.
I love it.
You know? And so institutionally, what happened with engineering was that, we got caught up in that everything had to be on paper, and I've seen like a bike lane, like they had to draw the entire bike lane in CAD. And I'm like, it's the same bike lane from here to there. Like, we didn't need to draw it all up. Like, design is great, but design is, I could have gone out in the field with a spray paint can and told you where to put the bike lane,
Yeah, so, get it done more accurately in about the same amount of time.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing, and consulting is coming around to that now, is where we're not as focused on the old PS&E model of.
For people that aren't familiar with PS&E.
Yeah, the whole, different stages of engineering drawings. There's 1%, there's 5%, there's 20%, there's 100%. It's like, let's get a concept, let's go design it, and go build it. It's like, we don't need so many stages of this. We can shorten the concept and design process a bit.
Yeah.
But what that's forcing is that we need to still make money as consultants. And so we have to get out in the field now. And so that's what I would say to all your listeners is, if you're not spending some time out in the field seeing your projects being built, and you're not helping with that final step, get ready, because it's coming. And I think architects, we should all love that. I think everybody that I've been recruiting the last few years, that's the number one thing when they come to me. They're like, I get to get out of the field. I get to get out of the office. And they love it.
I know. How can they not? I think that, gives people such meaning in their work. Is like, we all want to see we're making a difference. And, I think that one of the cool things that I've seen you all do a little bit is to measure some of that. So not to be a broken record, but do you have like a specific example? Maybe you could even share the slow street stuff that you guys have done during COVID, or if there's another project that's sort of like, how'd you guys go about it and how did you measure that impact?
I think Jan Gale says it best, and he's like, measure what you want to see more of, especially in transportation planning. We measure traffic and all the stuff we may not want to see more of, crashes, and we let fear guide us so much. Fear of congestion, of injury, of pollution, And so we're bombarded with numbers of fear. So how do we switch that around and let's start counting the things that really mean something to us? And so, we start counting how many people are holding hands. How long is somebody sitting in a location? You sit there long enough, that means you probably like the place. And then upon that, you see that economics starts working. People buy more in these spaces. The parklets we've been doing in the last year during COVID with a response to giving more space to restaurants outside. We've seen some more smiles under masks, but the immediate impact is it's a lot of these businesses had no outside space. So we just gave 35, 45 chairs to them.
Right.
In Texas, that's about $25 a chair that can turn over about 4 times.
I've been recently talking with a number of people that are like, parklets? What are parklets? They're just, for anyone that's not familiar with the term, can you describe, I know that they can be a lot of things, but I think that the way that you guys are doing them is also very specific and sort of has this modular component to it as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a rather unique American thing, I think, first of all, to that we have so much parking in our in our communities. And I think it's if you go back and look at the Bishop Arts District, we didn't tell anybody, but we were removing about 1 or 2 parking spaces a year and converting that into outdoor dining.
Yeah.
And so parklets was really kind of a revolution thing where it's like, I'm going to go pay for this parking spot and I'm going to put a public space on it. And so we had parking day every year. And so out of that, I think came, well, why don't we do that more times? Why can't we give that one parking space that is not paying that much rent on it to either public space or to restaurants to turn over.
Right.
And so just the conversion of them into an outdoor room is usually what it is. And you got to, so all the things that you want to do to make an outdoor room safe is it's got to be feel safe. So you got to have a little buffering from the car. Right. It can't be too loud. We learned if it's over 60 decibels on the roadway, you're not going to stay around much because anything above that, 60, 70, 80 decibel, that's kind of like an alarm clock going off in your ear. So you can't just go plop them down anywhere. It's got to have a road that is going to give you some quieter, not be as loud.
Yeah.
And then comfort, just making them feel good, and so sometimes that's shade, sometimes that's heat, sometimes that's accommodation for your dog.
Maybe a little greenery,
you got to have landscaping. So it's like a little park or a little outside room that you take into a parking space. And I think now they're getting all kind of crazy with them. I mean, we did several that are like, we did them in a strip mall where we're starting to take like private parking out. Like, whoa, that's it's dangerous stuff. We might have not have enough parking for the day after Christmas or the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh my God, yes. So related to that, I've recently heard that one of the things that you guys are doing is creating modular version and then helping work that through the permitting process so that can be replicated more easily from other people. Is that true? And if so, tell me more.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have, Better Block we open source the whole thing. So people all over the country are innovating with the Better Block name.
Yeah.
And we're also fortunate that Jason Roberts started our foundation a couple of years ago. So the Better Block Foundation is really the research arm of the whole thing. I mean, they're out there testing this modular parklets for us.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. We get to be kind of separate. We get to, we're the consulting arm and I get to watch and see, I see what they're doing. And, foundations, that's really what they should be making the mistakes, iterating and making new. And Jason and his team, Krista Nightingale, have just gone above and beyond. They're not afraid to fail. They're not afraid to experiment with new materials. And so if you look across the landscape of public space materials in this country, it's very sparse.
Yeah.
And COVID really brought that out. I tell you, I mean, COVID has uncovered a lot of stuff that we were not prepared for in this country.
Yeah, say more.
Yeah, I think folks had started thinking about parklets and the need for expansive of outdoor space in main
Yeah.
streets and all. I mean, Virginia built 20,000 square foot of parklets in a weekend.
Wow.
I think we bought out every, material in town. Like there were no planters left. There were no seats left. There was, we probably bought the majority of 2x4s at Walmart, they had. And scarcity became a real quick thing that we saw. And now that that's kind of getting over, people are wanting to keep all that space we've reclaimed in the country.
Yes.
But the materials and the knowledge is not there. If you go to France, there are makers that are building their outdoor dining facilities there. If you go to Spain or Italy, long history of building outdoor spaces in contemporary fashion almost. There's nothing here in America. So Better Blog Foundation is forging that industry in America.
Well, and that's it kind of gels a little bit with one of the questions I had about helping communities that may be disadvantaged economically or have seen less attention, both like how are we listening to them, but also how are we engaging them? And just you sharing that, I'm like, what an amazing potential for training, because jobs and skills training is a huge part of that as well. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around that topic.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I hope we don't go back to just the same old thing we did before, that now we realize like we need to be prepared in America for these things. And we ran out of overhead heaters.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Go try to find one right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
Why can't we build that in America? Like it's not a big deal to build a space heater outside, like we should be able to build that here. So I think it's uncovered, we should have been able to build our, make our own mask. The problem is as soon as the crisis is over, we go back to buying the cheap stuff. And so I hope we get some staying power and say, we need to build our cities with materials from our country and with skills from our country and not just order it out of a catalog or out of the internet. There's a lot more designers on this call that buy a lot more materials than I do. If we can try, and it's not going to be the cheapest, it's not going to be the most efficient, but if we can try to hire skilled locals to do some of that, it's going to make a big difference in our country when we do have crises like we just are going through right now.
Yeah. So can you maybe share a little bit about like, how do you guys engage with the surrounding community? As much as design is an act of doing, it also has a large component of listening and the process that goes behind it. I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
Yeah. I gotta admit, I think I had a bit of arrogance at some point in my career. After a few times that failed, we created a cool picture. It looked good.
Yeah.
But it may not have really become permanent, after a while.
Yeah.
And I started realizing like that picture that we created, that's just another bad rendering. Like, even though it was a lot of coolness at that time. So what I really started to focus on was, how does a Better Blog inspire permanent change in a place?
Yeah.
And I realized that didn't come from me doing all the work and like me making sure that it looked great. Like that's cool, but I would rather have look a little less good, but someone local made it and owned it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that really was a big learning lesson. And now what we've been trying to do is just make better tools for people to do it on their own. So the foundation now has WikiBlock, which is a CNC, people can make their own public furniture, kiosk, all kind of stuff. And it looks good. It's not, out of pallet wood.
Yeah.
And so we kind of started learning like, we can help people make it look good and they can do it themselves.
Right.
And then I one other one that just really, humbled me. I was working in Fort Worth, which we don't do a lot of Texas stuff anymore, but the city we had a section of road that had no sidewalk on it. And then they had done like a 1 block with sidewalk on it. But when they did the sidewalk, they took out all the trees. And so that was what stuck out to me immediately. I was like, well, we got a sidewalk, but we got no trees now. And then I saw people like still walking in the street. It's an African-American neighborhood. And at first I was just kind of like, well, I'm not sure why they walk in the street. And then we started questioning a few, hey, why are you walking in the street? And this lady was like, I want to walk in the street because I can see better peripherally if a dog's going to attack me. she'd been bitten by a dog. And then we asked some kids, high school kids, I was like, why are y'all walking in the street? And he said, that's because I can see the police coming easier. If I'm on the sidewalk, I can't see them coming. We asked the homeless guy, I was like, well, why are you walking in the street? He goes, because then I can see the drive-by coming. Their definition of walkability is so much different than mine. After a long explanation of the city and also showing them that this street was a lot hotter because it didn't have trees anymore. We said, let's make a shared street where it's legal for you to walk in the street. It's not considered jaywalking. We know walkability is good, but it has different definitions in different communities.
Yes. And, safe streets and slow streets. I mean, all of these things, I just think exactly to your story, that's why we have to ask first. So often people are like, no, we'll engage the community later, but like, we just need a good rendering. And you're like, I don't think so. Like, because if we start with that, then we're going to design the solution to a problem we don't understand at all. And so I think that that's such a great example for that. And also just like, how do you build ownership? Because a huge part of the success is like upkeep.
I think we just need to redefine what good is. Good is what works for that community. And it's not that putting those sidewalks in at the city of Fort Worth, that was a logical, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
But it shouldn't have been the only answer to what was happening there. So I don't even know if we've created the full spectrum of solutions for communities yet of what they need. Because I come back over to my neighborhood and we've got sidewalks, but I still have elderly people walking in the street. I still have families pushing strollers in it. And not to hang up on streets because there's all kind of different issues, but I think it's just perspective. As professionals, we cannot go in and say the new urbanist way is the only way to do it. The complete streets way is the only way to do it. We need to take that collected body of knowledge, understand people, and you get to understand them by, which I've done, going and eating samosas, sitting cross-legged in their kitchen, and figure out where they are and bring good design close to them and take them through. And I'd say the one I'm struggling with right now is there's a lot of underserved communities that the American dream of owning a car and a big house and a garage and commuting is still there. And very much a dream. I think a lot of fluid America, we've already gone through some of that and decided that was a bad health decision. But folks got to they may need to go through that mistake on their own. We've got to be a little bit more gentle with when we go in and say, we're taking your car away.
People don't love that one. As much as we know how much it damages the built environment and everything else, we're not getting very far by being anti whatever it is that they are in. We need a much better way of. I think it's where experiential is coming into play. There's a lot more of those communities I've seen. Once we got them out on a community walk or a community bike ride, then they got it and they said, "Oh, I still have my car, but now I can bike to the grocery store." That's such a good point. Is that I think so often, even one of the huge values of what you guys do is you give people a lens to be able to see what is possible. Because I think like that as a theoretical can often be confusing, a little disbelief, like what would that even look like? And then you're like, oh, this is what this would feel and look like. And I think, with the value of human connection, which I think is a small silver lining that we have come to a greater realization of our, interconnectedness. I just think that that's a really important part of showing people, actually, if you design this way, you could get to know some of your neighbors and get to be closer to other people in your community.
I think you're right, Erin. And it's, looking back 10 years now on this project, I think there was a bit of an emotional awakening over the last decade. People started feeling the city more. It wasn't just logical. It wasn't just put the road here, put the city, It got more of an emotional appeal to it. And then we realized that we don't just make decisions on logic either. Maybe we've hit the...
We're not the econ man. I always like to say, we're not logic.
And for whatever it's worth, in this presidential administration, we've seen the peak emotional decision-making being happening, maybe not in the right direction, but that is a bellwether for, I think, we've definitely been making a lot more emotional decisions in city building recently
Yeah.
too, whether good or not, out of fear. And I think where we're headed right now with it is that we have finally realized that vision, that American dream, that city on the hill, it has a lot of different ways that it looks for people.
Yeah.
There's not a model of it. There's not a new urbanist, one perfect city on the hill. It's going to look different for everybody, but we know we can make every place a little better.
Right.
And, I think that's where I've finally gotten to. I just did a bunch of projects in suburban strip malls.
Oh, cool.
We made it feel good. It changed the aura around it, if you would, by just adding some good to it. So I look at any landscape now and see good in it.
No, I saw some of those. For anybody that's listening, you should go onto the website, because I saw some of those, and when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen those. And it is amazing, because so often they just feel a little lifeless, to say the least. And you guys just create it into a public square. It shows you what's possible.
And that's really the spaces that are left right now. America has done such a great job with main streets and downtowns, that we're getting out there. We're getting on the fringe now. Yeah. And so, this next group of planners and designers that are listening to this podcast, like, you're going to be tasked with some pretty ugly places. And
prepare yourself.
Yeah, prepare, and it's not the bulldozer. Like, you're going to have to repair them. And it can be done. Like, I've felt the love in them now. Like, don't dismiss the parking lot.
Yeah. So kind of coming to a close, when you think about all of your experience working in communities across the globe, what's something that you wish more people knew and used to design for community and social connection?
I don't know. The immediate thing that comes to mind is just food, because that makes me happy. I got to tell you, in my travels, especially with my girlfriend, Lindsay, like, we kind of earmark our travel book by what great food we had. And food's more than just what you're eating. It's the absorption of the environment around you too at that time.
Totally.
You have a euphoric, so I can remember eating a soft serve ice cream on Quebec, on this really cool little plaza they had made with the pop-up food vendors, or this little cup of heavily milked coffee in San Jose, Puerto Rico, on a cafe there, or the street food that we had in Mexico on the little. So, I think it's a basic necessity, and I think in so many American public spaces and streets, we've removed that quick street food, and so I think the pandemic has brought out even more that we need windows. I think. Well, one of the fun ones we saw in Italy, they used to have during the plague, they had these little windows, wine windows.
Oh, nice.
And, same thing we're going through right now. They didn't want a lot of contact, but people wanted their wine, right? I got to have my wine.
Come on.
So they built these little doors that you could set a wine bottle in, and then the other side had another door where someone would pick it up, and you'd leave the money. We built a taco window in Farmers Branch, Texas.
Go on.
Yeah, so that you could pick up your tacos without having any contact. But I think what we've seen is this dramatic loosening in alcohol permits and food permits in America right now. I mean, it's kind of a free-for-all. And I don't want that to go away, because it so enlivens the street and public spaces. And we should just build that into every place that we think people are going to gather. Parks, main streets, parking lots, whatever.
I love it.
We need to make it easier, and we need to make it part of the central planning theme, is that we have quick food and beverage and small entrepreneurs that can pop up. For me, that's just a little pet peeve that I keep pushing.
I like it. Okay. Anything else that closing thoughts?
I think so much coming out of this pandemic that we're going to be in a real explosion of people getting together at some point.
Oh yeah.
We're going to be ready to party, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to make it. We're going to get there. I think our profession is going to change a lot over the next few months, and we've already seen it. I'm just really excited because I think it means a better appreciation of what's in between the buildings. We're all going to get better at designing that space together.
I can't thank you enough, Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with us. It's been a joy talking with you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Shared Space. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to subscribe wherever you're listening and head on over to Apple to give us a review. It really helps to spread the word, and we really appreciate it. I hope that your day is filled with honest emotion, kindness, and connection. Thanks so much, and take care.